Hello, friends. Welcome back to the third episode of The Red Room. Today we're going to be discussing that doesn't apply to my life directly, but that is very personal to several of my friends. We're going to be talking about what it's like to grow up as an Asian person in a predominantly white friend group and area of the country. Now, as you might be able to tell, I myself am white, so I'm not going to be doing very much of the talking in the recorded footage for this video. However, I will be introducing topics as they come and just sort of transitioning between things as my friends chose to talk about them when we recorded our session together in person. So, today's conversation is the same level of debatably serious depending on the subject matter. Today, we're talking about something that applies to everyone here but me, and I guess not our cat either. She's not Asian. We're talking about being Asian and being in a friend group full of white people when you're not white. I'm the white people, so I'm going to shut up now, and these three lovely people will introduce themselves and then speak on the topic.
And being in a town full of white people.
That is true.
So
that is very true.
Whatever you guys want to talk about that's relevant to that,
it is
please go ahead. But if everybody...
Suburb.
Yes, if everybody could introduce themselves.
Okay, I guess that means me first. Hi, I'm Sam. I'm
Age.
I
like to party.
I like to party. No, I'm
Age.
I'm trans. I'm Japanese. Yeah.
Hi, I'm RJ.
Age.
I'm
No,
Filipino.
you're not. I'm
Age.
Well, you know what? Birthdays
only one of us can be
Age.
in this
Your voice
household.
got like deeper for like
Highlander.
specifically.
and I exist.
And you're gay.
And I'm not straight and I'm not binary
We
in
love
terms
those.
of gender.
And I am Miles, and I
Age.
am half Japanese.
And not drinking.
Yeah, I'm not drinking. I'm drinking not alcohol.
Oops.
This is grape soda. I don't know what you're talking
Yeah,
about.
it's
Yeah.
grape soda. Anyways, I'm
Age.
and I'm half Japanese, and I am the cishet representative of the night.
Wonderful.
Mostly cishet, so
Yeah.
everything's on a spectrum.
It's
anyways.
true.
So
You're
I'm,
right.
I'm just further on the cishet side of the spectrum than these two.
So,
Yeah.
We, for reference, we all went to a community college.
The three
or
of
are
us.
going to. I graduated.
Yeah, and so did I.
And
No, but
Yeah.
Sam.
I go to a
Don't call me out
full-time
like that.
university. I'm senior, and I'll be graduating next year. And I'm president of that cultural club.
We
Yeah.
love one
We
Miles.
love to see it.
Miles' last name. We love Miles' last name.
Miles burp. Now, like I said, I'm not going to be doing very much of the talking in the pre-recorded video. My friends will be leading from topic to topic, and I'll just be clarifying things that they said that maybe weren't as clear in the original recording. When did you realize that you were not Asian? I mean...
Wait.
Wait.
Not yet.
When did you realize that you were different from, like, your white counterparts?
It took me a long time. I spent a lot of my childhood being very, very whitewashed. And so it was like, I don't know, about what, like a year ago or so?
A little more.
Was kind of like when I realized. It was actually that conversation with you.
So it's a lot later for you than
Yeah.
than some people.
Yeah, and I think that's partially a function of my bringing up and being whitewashed, and partially because, my features lean more towards white than Asian. At least, when I look at myself in the mirror kind of thing, it's different for other people.
So you'd say,
apparently.
like, you're, like, white passing.
Yeah, I do. I definitely, say that, when I do activism stuff or I talk about my privilege and stuff, I do acknowledge the fact that I am very white passing, and that affects, my life and my say and my privilege and all of that.
Yeah, I definitely realized at a lot younger age, but it didn't really, for me, most of the time it didn't play a big role, and I still feel that it doesn't necessarily play as big a role as it does for some other people.
Yeah.
But let's see. I mean, as early as elementary school, I beginnings of elementary school, like first, second grade, I noticed some of the differences. And some of them became more, and actually I became a lot more aware, and stuff became more pronounced when I got into college and joined a cultural club, a Japanese cultural club, which I can get into more later.
Yeah.
And because I have the college campus experience, it's a little different from you guys, I know.
Yeah.
Well, you guys already know the line, but up until I was 6 years old, I thought I was white. And then when reality slapped me in the face that first day of first grade, I spent a good couple of years hating myself because I was not comfortable with who I was.
So when RJ says different here, they mean obviously not being white in a place full of white people. And for me, and maybe some of you as white people, you know, that's probably not a foreign concept, but it might be kind of weird to think about. And it's equally important to recognize that not everybody who's not white in a predominantly white area has the same experience. In fact, even just between my 3 friends here, they all have very different experiences throughout their lives thus far with, you know, how their day-to-day relates to race. And so with that said, how does race play a role in relationships, friendships, etc., and how you interact with people throughout your life?
Yeah, I mean, I know that a lot of what we wanted to discuss today too was like how you know, being not white and being, you know, at least in our case, LGBT, how that affects friendships that we make. And I think it's an interesting thing because, you know, it's quite easy to call out, you know, white people on their privilege when it's somebody you don't know to the extent of like a best friend. But that becomes, you know, for some people, becomes a lot harder to call white people and their privilege and their bullshit when you're best friends with them and you know it's kind of the same energy as like online bullies hiding behind a keyboard, but instead you're hiding behind your friendship. And I know, like, you know, that has unfolded and played out differently for me than it has for either of you guys. So takes on that, I guess. I know that's a pretty broad question.
Yeah, no, it's just like, you know, it's easy to see this person who's obviously doing some wrong. Like, as somebody you don't know, you know, at first, and just be like, hey, you know, be better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, you gotta hope in your heart that they're going to take that to heart. But when it's like somebody you know, it's just like, you know this person, you're not sure how they're going to react to these things because it's just like they're set in their ways, and you know, it's just one thing that.
And it's also a lot harder to see somebody that you're close to that extent say something racist or homophobic or whatever, and try to, like, you know, reason with yourself in your brain and be like, you know, they didn't mean that. They don't understand what they're saying. Like, you know, I know them really well and I know that they know better than that. It's hard to draw that line between like, oh, that was a tasteless joke and I can call them out on it and they'll be better, or that's how they think and I have to call them on that and teach them to be better. And on top of that, having to do the emotional labor that it takes to teach a friend of yours to be better is hard, and it's also something that's not always easy to bring upon yourself.
I mean, I suppose there's like a recent example. Friend of mine from Utah, a friend of ours, RJ and mine, from Utah, was talking about a recent microaggression they experienced at work, where someone said hero to them, like the R's instead of the L's. And they weren't quite sure how to take that. It's like, did they like mean that? Like it's like a racist thing or what? It's like, and so you like, and there's just these like things you deal with. And especially since Asians are the model minority, in quotation marks, I feel like our experience is pretty different from what other minorities experience. Like, and I think that's like a big thing. It's not necessarily like saying stuff's better or worse for us. It's just different.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important thing to point out, because obviously we don't experience violence, at least these days, on the same level.
Yeah.
Police brutality, like hate crimes. But of course with the COVID-19 pandemic starting in China, that's changing as well. And of course, even though we are in a white suburb, it is still LA, Los Angeles area.
We're still in a blue county.
So it's a blue county.
Yeah.
So perhaps we're experiencing it better than a lot of people are in other areas.
Yeah.
This might not be immediately clear, but without any insight on what it feels like to be on the receiving end of disparaging comments about race, many white people who are well-intentioned might not understand the harm that they're doing by saying or doing certain things.
I mean, yeah, no, it's just like, even in these metropolitan areas, you're bound to experience these microaggressions. Like, when I visited Utah for the first time, I mean, I experienced a microaggression in which there was this group of white, like, middle-aged people. They saw me and they're just like, oh, look at this guy right here, he's fucking weird, and tried to shield me from their friends, even though I was just with my family. And, you know, with, you know, looking right at me, straight toward me, nobody else. I mean, then again, I mean, like, I'm not going to justify the reason why they felt that way because I was dressed a certain way or something like that. But at the same time, it's just, even though it's a metropolitan city, they still think a certain way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting to see how in various other, you know, metropolitan cities across the country that aren't as, like, you know, not that LA County is, like, supremely heavily Asian, but, you know, more so than, like, say, like, Salt Lake City or something. It's interesting to see how microaggressions and racism changes between metropolitan cities. Because, you know, we think, like, oh, you know, like, everybody's gonna support Black Lives Matter in LA because it's LA. But that's not necessarily the case. You still, you know, you still see the Trump card rallies and you still see microaggressions, and there's still a lot of white people who think they're doing good and who think they're liberal and that they're good or whatever, but they're committing microaggressions and they don't even know. And it's interesting to see how you know, we or like other minorities like Hispanic people or like LGBT people or black people or whatever, how we, I guess not quantify, but like define microaggressions versus how white people define microaggressions. Because, you know, there are so many liberals out there who don't even realize some of the terrible shit that they've been saying. They just don't know.
Oh, yeah.
And it sucks because it's like, you know, they do want to be better and they want to learn to be better. But also, like, there's a weird culture of left-leaning people who think they are better than, you know, right-leaning racists. But they're not that much better. But when you tell them, like, hey, that was pretty fucking racist, that was definitely a microaggression, they get defensive. Mm-hmm. And that's weird. That's something I've never been able to wrap my mind around. Like, why?
Yeah, this defensive, their like, defense.
I voted for Biden. Isn't that enough?
I mean,
like,
no,
basically nothing.
What exactly are you doing for my people?
Yeah.
To warrant some kind of comment like that, if that makes sense. You know, it's just you know, your tasteless comment doesn't have anything to do with how you voted. It doesn't have anything to do with who you talk to. It kind of has to do with who you talk to. It has mostly to do with your inherent biases that you don't really understand. Like, not understand, but, like, you know of.
And I would wager to say, like, also the way that your actions are perceived by the people that you need to be benefiting or lifting up the most.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we talk about how some people vote for the good guy and think that they get off scot-free for any discrimination that they might promote or perform. And that's just simply not true. Now, in the case of the 2020 presidential election, which is right before I filmed this with my friends, neither option was very good in our view. And, you know, personally for me, it's all about just getting Trump out of office. Thank you, everybody. But voting for Joe Biden or another Democratic candidate or whoever's the best option, quote unquote, for minority groups out of two options for any elected office is only just scratching the surface of what you can do to stand up for people with less privilege than you. It's important to take more focused action on things at the local level or the personal level and make sure that you're not passing up an opportunity to help someone or lift them up by thinking that you are just done after you vote for somebody. things.
It should be the bare minimum, basically, to just be willing to treat everyone around you with the same level of respect as you do the people of your same race, and then try and go above and beyond and like correct other people if you can.
Yeah.
Obviously, you don't always want to be speaking for other people, but it's like you should call people out when they say like racist things or like have basically their racial biases in one way or another. Even stuff like, oh, all Asians are good at math. It's like a positive in quotation marks, like
still a microaggression. Still
it's
discrimination.
Like, it's like, oh, can you balance the books, like you're Asian, you're probably good with numbers, or it's like the same thing as doing that to a Jewish person, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like
motherfucker, I'm the gayest fucking person you know. I can't do math.
And here we started talking about stereotypes. And, there are a lot of stereotypes that masquerade as positive, especially about Asian people. There's the typical Asians are good at math stereotype. And while that might sound like a good thing, saying that, oh, well, it's a compliment, obviously, you're good at math and I'm not, so you're better. It's still a stereotype, and regardless of what the words are that are coming out, what the intent is, whether it sounds like a compliment or doesn't, stereotyping someone based on their racial or other background characteristics is never a good thing, and it never comes off positive to the people on the receiving end.
I know plenty of people, especially like in my club, like at school, and I'm at like a university, 4-year university that's pretty well respected. It's like, I know plenty of people in my club, they're Japanese, they're not very good at math, they're there for other reasons.
Yeah.
Like, they're really good with history, they want to study East Asian languages, etc. It's just a weird stereotype, and it's like unnecessary, and it's like, you don't go around with like white people going like, oh, it's like, you're white, so I can't think of a good example.
There's nothing that white people are known for being good at.
No,
colonialism?
They enjoy Miracle Whip.
You're white, you must like mayonnaise.
Pretty good, right? Yeah, no.
Yeah, and stuff like that on the surface, and even to most people, doesn't seem like very much. But it's like just something you got to watch out for, And stuff like that on a more widespread extent is just gotta be careful about.
Yeah. And it's like when you don't call out racism when you see it, we end up with somebody like Trump in office because people say and do the racist things that they do, and then there's nobody to tell them that's wrong, and then they see a political figure like Trump or like somebody else, I can't think of any other names right now, and they don't think there's anything wrong with that.
They feel emboldened to go the same way.
Many white people who live in places like the area where we do, where it's predominantly white, both culturally and ethnically, they tend to get isolated in this bubble where it is hard to relate to or think about or take action on issues that don't affect white people as much or at all. And this is one of the reasons, many reasons, that it is so common for systematic racism to prevail, even in places where the general populace seems not to be openly and blatantly racist. Now, here, a lot of them are, very unfortunately, but even in places where that's not the case, you'll still see laws and regulations that unfairly affect people who are not white.
And then there was another thing I wanted to touch on that reminded me when you were speaking, was that I saw some discourse online about, like, Republicans talking about how liberals live in the liberal bubble. And, of course, I don't think that's true. But it's interesting how white people kind of live in the white bubble. Like, if you think about it, like it's interesting that they, because they're the majority just about everywhere, unfortunately. And they surround themselves with other white people. And they talk in white spaces, and they go to white schools, and they do all of these things. They, they read white newspapers and stuff like that. And it's interesting how there's kind of this white bubble basically everywhere. Like, I can't think of very many, if any at all, like major news sources or other media outlets or something like that is not majority white.
And I think on the liberal side, it can turn into a fetishization of Asian culture, especially Japanese or Korean culture, I would say are the big ones.
Yeah.
You can even see, like, I could even say it within my own family. Like, I have some cousins who are like, oh, we're so into Japan. It's like we're gonna, like we want to visit Japan and do all this. And I think that's cool and stuff. I think it's cool to be into Japan. You know, you're super into a lot of stuff from Japanese culture.
But
for
I'm
example.
respectful
Of
about
course.
it. Yeah, no, it's just like
And,
Yeah.
and there's you got to strike a balance with it.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it's super cool and important to be interested in other cultures, but I think there definitely is a line where it becomes a fetishization, kind of a gross thing.
Yeah. Also, by being ingrained in a very white culture of media and the people you know, your family, etc., you might be drawn to looking at special characteristics that only exist for people of other races as exotic or unique in a way that deserves, pinpoint attention. And while it is important to recognize the differences between yourself and others and respect them, it's not respectful to fetishize them and to make those characteristics an otherworldly desirable thing that you can't get and then project that onto the people who have them. That's not fair, and it's kind of gross, if I'm being honest.
If you are not a Mandalorian in the Star Wars universe, you do not wear Mandalorian armor.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go.
that's for you nerds out there.
Thanks.
Yeah, for you nerds out there.
I'm bullying you, but it's not because I'm white and you're not. It's because you're a nerd.
It's just a thing of respect, and be glad that like Asians don't kill you because you're wearing a kimono like the Mandalorians would.
Yeah, exactly.
But we're not going to be happy about it, you know. I mean,
Fully,
you have to do it in a respectful way, you know.
Yeah.
No, you can wear a kimono if you're, participating in the culture in terms of
Yeah, like if you're
going through the motions of that culture, but
Yeah.
you can't just wear a kimono and be like, oh, this is so pretty.
Yeah. It's like you can wear a kimono if you're going to an event where wearing a kimono is appropriate.
Yes.
You
And
cannot
that's, in fact,
wear a
a form of
kimono.
respect in some cases.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can't wear a fucking kimono to go to the grocery store.
Yeah.
You should not be wearing a kimono to go and take a photo shoot somewhere.
And so here we're transitioning into a really important topic, cultural appropriation versus cultural participation. And now what does that mean? Well, we'll explain it in the videos, but essentially cultural appropriation is using something from another culture that you are not a member of or party to for personal gain in a way that was not intended by that culture. And, we'll give examples in the video.
I think it's important to note, a culture is not a costume. You can't just wear a kimono and say, "Oh, this is my costume."
Yeah, or like Native American headdresses and stuff.
It's like
Or rice patty hats.
And there's times where it can be acceptable. It's like if you're cosplaying a certain character, or if you're dressing as a certain character from a show or something as Halloween, and they happen to be wearing a kimono. But as long as you're clearly that character, it's like I'm this character.
Yeah.
Then it's totally acceptable. I feel it's
Yeah.
it's about context too.
Yeah.
But a culture in itself is not a costume.
No.
Yes.
Yeah,
Exactly.
you as someone who's not, say, Japanese, can dress up as a Japanese character, but that doesn't involve making yourself not look.
And I'm all for that.
It's
if you
it's
wanna
not about
dress-
making
yeah.
yourself look Japanese. It's about making yourself look like the character. You
Yeah.
know.
You bring up an excellent point, actually. The fact that there are white people out there who are taping their eyes to the side to look Japanese, or even going as far as getting plastic surgery to look Korean, really talks to the point of, what are you trying to do personally with your life that made you make this choice?
I know that there's some people out there who are like, oh, you can't, if you're not this race, you can't cosplay as this character. And I think that's bullshit.
I think that starts getting into gatekeeping.
Yeah, that's gatekeeping territory. And I think it's fine to be into the things you're into.
Yeah.
You just have to do it in a respectful manner.
Yeah. And so here a couple of my friends are going to be talking about growing up around white kids at school and how what they bring for their lunch or how they dress or how they act or the customs that they've been raised with by their families are seen as weird or are used in such a way that the other kids make them an outcast.
I would get questions from kids that I wouldn't necessarily expect, because like you don't go up to somebody and be like, are you Italian, or are you, I mean, unless you're, real recognizes real, as some people say. But like straight up, I was in the bathroom in like 2nd grade, and this kid, I'm just washing my hands, he comes up behind me, he's like, are you Chinese?
Oh no.
And I'm like, no. And he's like, okay.
I remember having to correct a lot of kids, like, they weren't as blatant as, like, Archie's example, but I remember having to correct a lot of people, like, no, not all Asians are Chinese, but all, like, Asian people are Asian, So
and then
you can refer to me as Asian, that's fine. I'm half Asian, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure, it works.
But it's like, I people learned over time, obviously, but that's something you encounter a lot in elementary school. It's like, are you Chinese? And it's like, no, I'm Japanese, but both types are Asian, so you can use Asian.
And then,
Yeah.
in my case, like specifically unique to like Filipinos,
Yeah.
like there are people who will correct you on your own race as if you haven't been living that for your whole life. They'll be like, Filipinos aren't Asian.
And
They're
you're
Pacific
like,
Islander. And I'm just like, shut the fuck up, perhaps.
Yeah.
what the fuck?
Like-
That's fucked up. One can, unfortunately, even see racism within their own family. As you'll see here, Sam has something to say about how their mom, who was white, spent a lot of, Sam's life making a point to fetishize the Asian characteristics that they have. And that's definitely not okay. Being in the same family as someone or being related to them does not absolve you from racism and does not make you unable to be negative about their traits.
And I remember my mom whitewashing it so that, like, because when I was a little kid, I was, like, in dance classes, and I was in Girl Scouts, and I was in all of those other things that my mom put me in. And I remember her correcting people, but with the wrong pronunciation of her last name. And then our G-Chum moved in, and he made a big fuss about it. And I was like, what's wrong with that? We're just giving them an easier way to say it. And he was like, but that's not how you say it. Mm-hmm. And I remember my mom by this point had been married to my dad for like 14 years. So she's had this last name for 14 years. And she was just then learning how to say it correctly because my Ji-chan forced her to say it. And it's her own fucking last name. Yeah. And I remember just like feeling weird about that because I was like, why is it such a big deal? Like, why is this a problem? Why can't we just say it the way we've been saying it for 10 years? That works just fine and people get it easier. And that was kind of, I didn't get that at the time, but looking back on that a few years later when I was in high school, I kind of understood how, what am I trying to say? I kind of understood how minorities kind of bend over backwards to make things easier for white people.
Yeah, no, it's
and
just
how
like,
embarrassing and sad that is, and how like bulldozery that is.
And this ties in very cleanly to hair as a subject, and that's not something that we'll go into very deeply in this session, but it is a very important thing culturally for many people, as the way that one's hair grows can be very affected by your biological and ethnic background, and so making one's characteristics of their hair desirable in some way, like we've been saying, comes off as racial fetishization. Whether it's very clear or subtle, taking a deeper dive into this subject will explain a little bit better.
Hair in itself is just it's such a weird thing because like it shows who you
say about that.
Yeah, no, it shows who you are in a certain way or another.
Yeah. And, speaking on that, was a lot of my childhood was spent both directly being whitewashed and at the same time on the completely other end of the spectrum being fetishized by my own mother. And I remember throughout a large chunk of my childhood, basically until I was, until my mom died, really. my whole life. I remember my mom always being like, oh, you have such pretty long Asian thick hair, and you have such pretty tan skin, and all of these things, and like you have such pretty Asian features and all of this stuff. And she'd always want to like, you know, like touch my hair. And like, you know, when we were in cheer, and both me and my sister, when we were in cheer and we were younger, she'd always make us, because, you know, competitive cheer is a whole other fucking thing. But one of the things is that, you know, if you're lighter skinned or whatever, you have to get spray tans. And so my mom would make us sit outside every day during the summer for at least 4 or 5 hours to tan. And then she'd talk about, the whole time, she'd talk about, oh, you guys are so lucky that you tan and you get nice and dark and you don't sunburn and all of these things. And I like, you know, I never thought anything of it because that's how my mom always was throughout my whole childhood. But then, you know, I'm gonna bring it to our conversation that we had, is that when I talked to you about that, I realized how fucking gross that is that like it's my hair and my skin. Like, I didn't choose it. I didn't choose to tan easily. I didn't choose to have thick long brown hair. Like, that was not my choice. That was what I was born with. And kind of realizing that my mom was like fetishizing me, but at the same time like just openly shutting down my dad when he like wanted to cook Asian dishes, or like my Ji-chan wanted to have Japanese newspapers to read, or like my Ji-chan wanted to teach us Japanese and stuff like that. That were all things that she like shut down. She's like, that food's stinky, and like they don't need to learn Japanese, and like all of these things. But at the same time, she's like complimenting us on our hair and our skin, and she's giving us Japanese middle names.
Cultural appropriation can reach beyond things as blatant as Halloween costumes or other forms of dress and expression, and it can even reach into something so close and basic as food. You'll find that there are many examples of white people, especially prominent white chefs, misusing recipes or, you know, the ideas of certain foods from other cultures for literal profit and social gain. And this is very much not okay and does not go unnoticed by those cultures.
You see kids now eating like Asian dishes in their school lunches.
Yeah.
Or rather they were before
COVID.
Before COVID. And then like, you know, people will talk about how you know, like sushi's great and stuff like that.
And
but
ramen's so good, and we have all of these fucking places in LA that are the best ramen ever, or whatever.
Or fuck it, like, you know, like I straight up saw on YouTube, like, there was this white lady talking about Filipino food, and she was, you know, hyping it up as if it was like the next best thing. But if there's one thing that restaurateur / author Eddie Huang has taught me, it's just like, we don't need white people to enjoy our own food. You know, they can elevate it, they can do whatever they want with it, but at the end of the day, it's still gonna be our food.
Exactly. It's so many white girls
I'm
out
so
there.
into boba.
Boba,
And it's like a lot of, I find that like, it seems like a lot of, not all, but a lot of the boba restaurants that have been popping up, at least around us for the last few years, are owned by like Asian families.
Which is good.
And that's
Yeah.
really cool. But like, the way that that's like culturally used by the white people who are our like locals around here is still like, it's still like you're still taking this in the wrong context.
Yeah.
You're making it your trend thing when it's not yours to do that with.
It doesn't help anybody. I mean, like, when we look at quinoa,
Yeah.
we are
This is fancy food.
it's fancy food, but we're also putting Peruvian farmers through hunger because we don't know how to stop.
Yeah.
And that the thing about, like, we don't know how to stop because America itself, and, you know, just culture in general, is always trying to push something to us so we can pay for it and make money off of it.
Yeah.
On
Yeah.
either side.
And I mean, you can look at like a example that I can think off of the top of my head is like Tex-Mex fusion places. Like, you know, you see like Guy Fieri owns one, Bobby Flay owns one. All of these various like famous white male chefs own these Mexican fusion Tex-Mex places where they have like these weird like botched and like pieced together traditional Mexican food. cannot be traditional Mexican food if you're not a Hispanic person cooking it. And that is just that on that.
And honestly, like, this has happened to Asian food more than once. I have lost respect for both Gordon Ramsay and Andrew Zimmern, famous for bizarre foods, because they have opened Asian food places that are, barely, they take recipes from Asian countries and then try to make it their own, quote unquote. And not only that, we also have to talk about Chinese food syndrome and MSG when we think about these things too, because the thing is, I was reading, a food website, and there was this lady hyping up clean Chinese food when she herself is a white woman.
And this is about where we'll be closing out for today. Now, the four of us might do a follow-up episode soon to clear up some of the things that we've mentioned in passing during this recording session. Whether or not you've heard those things is something for editing me to decide, but either way, you very well may see some of us again soon. Either way, this has been The Red Room. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you have any comments about today's subject matter, please feel free to leave them in the comments below, and I'll try to interact and respond when necessary. If you liked the video, please leave a like. If you didn't, feel free to leave a dislike. And check out the playlist that I'll put up there for the other episodes of this series as it develops. If you want to see more of this series as it comes out, or more of my videos on camera, please feel free to check out my on-camera playlist, which will show up here, and subscribe to the channel for more coming soon, usually every Monday at 7. Thanks for watching. I've been Olivia, and I'll see you later. Bye.
I'm making
eye contact.
uncomfortable eye contact with you guys. Make eye
Prolonged
contact with me.
We enjoy
Prolonged eye contact.
your listening.
Prolonged eye contact. Okay.
The audio is clipping so hard.
It's a Bo Burnham thing.
Sorry for your ears.
3, 2, 1. RJ's in the bathroom. RJ's in the bathroom. RJ's in the bathroom. 1, 2, 3, 4. Look at that.
Oh no.
That's what I call a blue wave.
How did we all know to do that?
Because we all listen to the same music.
Food in itself is integral to a culture, but the thing is, like, culture in itself is shared with people. I mean, that's why we have Panda Express and Taco Bell, which,
Maybe we should stop sharing things with white people.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Hot take.
Historically,
I personally think Panda Express and Taco Bell are great.
They're great.
Just
don't
refer to them as authentic.
Yeah.
Oh,
Food from that
so your
culture.
dad gets a headache from authentic Chinese food. I get a stomach ache from Panda Express. Take that.
Yeah.
Name.
Yeah.